was on an airplane that's been hijacked, and things don't go well, and it's not looking good. I just want you to know I absolutely love you, and I will see you later, Chester. Bye, Dave.
I remember it like it was yesterday. The moment the world changed.
This indeed was the trigger that transformed the world.
I was in a taxi, driving through downtown Manhattan.
A huge explosion now raining debris on all of us. We better get out of the way.
Then, the confusion.
It collapsed. The top floors collapsed down.
The smell of jet fuel and burned bodies. Was it Saddam or Osama? I believed everything I was told.
2 airplanes have crashed into the World Trade Center in an apparent terrorist attack on our country.
But what really happened that day?
The official story of 9/11 is a monstrosity. It is an insult to the intelligence.
Time passed. We buried the event in our collective psyche. But has that wound really healed? Should we have believed everything we were told?
The same people that told us there were weapons of mass destruction in Iraq when they knew they weren't, those very same people gave us the official story of 9/11.
Exactly 18 years later, I'm going to find out. By sitting down for a live broadcast with the expert on 9/11 conspiracies, David Icke.
Problem, reaction, solution. First of all, you create the problem, but you get someone else to be blamed for it. You get the public to react to your problem by saying something must be done, this can't go on, what are they going to do about it? And at that point, they then offer the solution to the problems they have created.
His new book, The Trigger, reveals the truth of what happened that day, and the world will never be the same again.
When you sweep away the layers of propaganda, you start to see the connections and you start to see where it's going. Know the outcome and you'll see the journey.
Uncensored and uncut, the truth will be revealed. The world is changing. Inspiration is everywhere. It has never been so easy to connect, share, and bring people together. We're learning from others and finding the best in ourselves. Challenging our beliefs. Sharing our vulnerability. Overcoming our fears. Transforming ourselves so we can transform the world. How far can we go?
This is London Real. I am Brian Rose. My guest today is...
This is London Real. I am Brian Rose. My guest today is David Icke, the English writer and public speaker known since the 1990s as a professional conspiracy theorist, calling yourself a full-time investigator into who and what is really controlling the world. You are the author of over 21 books and 10 DVDs and have lectured in over 25 countries, speaking live for up to 10 hours to huge audiences, filling stadiums like Wembley Arena. Today, you're here to discuss your new book, The Trigger, The Lie That Changed the World, Who Really Did It and Why, which explores your alternative theories on who orchestrated the 9/11 attacks. David, welcome back to London Real.
Thank you, Brian.
Super excited to do this. We are streaming this live. We're trying to get this out to everyone possible today on 9/11. It's the 18th anniversary of those attacks that happened in Manhattan. And I thought I would just kick off the episode and talk about my experiences there that day.
Okay.
And then I kind of want to pass everything over and I want to hear what you've been writing about. I know you have been researching this and this has been on your radar for the past 25 years.
Yeah, I first started researching 9/11 on 9/11. virtually, because up to that point, from 1990, I'd been researching how the world's controlled by a few people, the structure through which it's controlled and what makes that possible, and what the agenda is, and the techniques of manipulation, perceptual manipulation of the public that allows them to get the public on board with what they want to do. And when I heard about the attacks on 9/11, I immediately saw it as an absolute classic example of what I termed over many years problem, reaction, solution. This is a devastating technique of mass manipulation where you create a problem, blame someone else for it, in this case, Osama bin Laden. You tell the public through an unquestioning, pathetic media, mainstream, the version of that problem you want the public to believe. And that's another classic. That's exactly what's happened over 9/11. All this period, Brian, of going around the world, of researching 9/11, I have not yet come across one serious mainstream documentary investigating 9/11 and asking questions about the official story. If that is a coincidence and an accident, then I've got some seafront property in the Midwest they might like to buy. So with problem, reaction, solution, you create the problem, you tell the public the version of the problem that you want them to believe, and you want their reaction. My goodness me, and understandably so, 9/11 is a perfect example. You want fear, you want outrage, you want a reaction of something must be done, this can't go on, what are they going to do about it? And then those who have covertly created the problem and blame someone else, got that reaction, do something, then openly offer the solutions to the problems they have themselves created, which are changes in society, which advance their agenda. And because of 9/11, that's why I call it the trigger. 9/11 was the trigger of a sequence of events still unfolding, which has led to mass murder mayhem in the Middle East, as country after country was picked off, all pre-9/11 listed, by the way, by the people that really did it, and has led to a ever-gathering destruction of basic civil liberties, basic privacy, and the justification of surveillance, mass surveillance on the public. 9/11 changed the world. 9/11 changed the world in a way that the people that really did it, who we're going to get into, wanted the world to change, because it was a classic of what I termed all these years, problem, reaction, solution. And so having seen that, immediately it happened, and especially when they started saying, this is what we must do as a result of it, I started investigating it seriously all the way through the rest of 2001, all the way through the first half of 2002. And I published in September 2002 what there may have been others, I don't know, but from my personal experience, the first major book challenging the official story of 9/11. It was called Alice in Wonderland and the World Trade Center Disaster, Why the Official Story of 9/11 is a Monumental Lie. And funnily enough, I started out with the trigger to do an update on Alice in Wonderland. I thought, all these years on, I'm going to update the book. 2 weeks in, blank sheet of paper. We're off again. We're starting again. And over the last year, little more than a year, of full-time research and writing when I wasn't doing other things, I was writing it partly in hotel rooms when I was on the road speaking. I put together a book. In fact, it's 2 books, Brian. The first half of the book demolishes the official story of 9/11. The second half of the book tells an amazing story which leads to who actually did it and, in many ways, how. And I said to you when we chatted a few months ago, my next book's going to be the most controversial one I've ever done. And you went, what? More controversial than the others?
It's a strong statement for David Icke.
Yeah, it is. And it's going to get a lot of reaction. from the public who read it and go, because it already has from people who've had pre-publication copies. They've gone, whoa! And it's also going to get me demonized by the people that I name. So yeah, life's going to be interesting, but then again, that's what life's about, isn't it?
Yeah, and that's what you do. Well, let me talk about that day for me, because I think it'll frame especially the kind of problem that it was, because there was a lot of terror that day. And then I would love to get into the details. And again, we're going to go into everything from Tower 7 to the 4 flights, to Osama bin Laden, to Iraq, to all sorts of other players involved that are still involved in the administration and how it's affecting decisions that even happened yesterday.
Right.
So for everybody here, just strap in, because we're going to cover as much as possible that we can in this book. First of all, this is the 18th anniversary of the event, and I just want to also be respectful to all the people that lost their life that day. I think it was...
I've dedicated the book to them.
Yeah, and I appreciate that. Nearly 3,000 people. I knew some people in the top of that tower because I was in the financial industry who were stuck at the very top. It was a company called Euro Brokers. I knew some people up there. So just want to be respectful of them, and I appreciate you donating or as acknowledging them in the book. Real quickly, it was a beautiful, crisp, sunny day in September. And I was living on Houston between Avenue A and Avenue B, probably a kilometer away from the site. You know, I check a map, and it's pretty close, 1 or 2 clicks. I was flagging a taxi, going to work. I was working for a kind of a dot-com startup in the commercial real estate business on 8th Avenue and 36th Street. I was catching a taxi, listening to a MP3 player that I think was made by Nike. Apple hadn't done one yet. Completely oblivious to what was about to happen that day. Got into a taxi, we're driving down Houston. I look to my left, there's a big hole in the Trade Center. Looked like about 4 stories tall. And the taxi said, yeah, a plane crashed into the Trade Center. And I thought, didn't that happen in New York once before? Maybe a plane went into the Empire State Building in the 30s. And I thought, that's bad, but it's a little odd. And we went a little bit further, and then he said, another plane's gone in. And that's when both of us, complete strangers, looked at each other in the taxi and realized our reality has just shifted. Maybe our lifetime reality has just shifted. Something major just happened. I start getting calls from my friends on my mobile, start telling me what's happening. Mobile lines go dead. I make my way to my office. I get landline calls from all my buddies in banking who have all the access to the information. They're like, the Pentagon's getting hit, this is happening. And it was a crazy day that unfolded. I was actually in the commercial real estate business. One of our editors went all the way down to ground zero to cover it. We went to the roof and literally watched the towers fall. I had to walk home that day, and we all walked the streets of New York City in an eerie silence because they shut down public transportation. There were F-16 fighter jets scrambled and going down the coast of Manhattan, and everyone walked home almost in silence. It was a really scary day. I remember I had a sprained ankle, and I walked 36 blocks and 8 avenues home. I remember I got a bottle of vodka and went to the roof deck of my apartment and watched the building burn. And that was 9/11 for me. And it was a scary day. And the days that ensued, it's really hard to describe the terror that was happening. Everyone was scared. There were bomb threats in buildings the next day. The anthrax scare hit New York City 7 days later, and no one knew when the next attack was going to happen. And it's hard for people to understand how frightened America was and angry America was. We really didn't know what was going to happen next, and we were in this perpetual state of fear, anger, confusion. So that's what I remember, and I remember military everywhere, David. I remember guys with M16s at the airport. We never saw that before. I remember the smell of what smelled like jet fuel and rotting human bodies. I don't know what it was. Maybe it was other chemicals in the buildings. I don't know what it was, but it was a horrible aftermath. And that's what I remember, you know.
And the point is, going on from what I said earlier, Brian, is what you've just described is an extreme version of problem, reaction, solution, because in the middle of that, you have to get the public in fear. And 9/11, as you've just described, got the American public in a level of terror. And I've done an enormous amount of research over the last 30 years into mind control techniques. And one of the classic techniques of mind control is to get the target in states of extreme fear. what they do with children, horrific as it may sound, we're dealing with psychopaths, by the way, the psychopaths behind 9/11. They will get them, while in captivity in these mind control projects, to experience their worst nightmare. They'll put them in a pit with spiders. They'll put them in a pit with snakes. They'll make them terrified because it's a well-known trait of mind control that if you get someone in states of fear and terror, they become suggestible. So you've got a traumatized, quite understandably, American population, which then becomes suggestible to what needs to be done about it. And as I show in the book, the suggestions of what should be done were planned long before 9/11 and have played out ever since.
Where do we start, David?
Well, I think, as I've said in the book, I'm not setting out to say what did happen, although there's a phenomenal amount of information that says and leads us to see in so many ways how it was done. But my point was to show that the official story didn't happen. It's what didn't happen that opens up the story, the conspiracy. And with 9/11, it's some strange thing to say. It's basically like a centipede with loads and loads of legs, aspects, parts of the story. And every single one, as I show in the book, of those legs has an Achilles heel. Something that says, this doesn't make sense, or this can't have happened because of A, B, C, and D. And the biggest Achilles heel of all is Building 7. Most people, well, whether it's still most people, I don't know, but one heck of a lot of people have no idea that 3 buildings fell on 9/11. There was the 2 World Trade Center towers. There was Building 7. Building 7 was owned by Larry Silverstein before he bought the lease, weeks before 9/11, and increased dramatically the insurance in the case of a terrorist attack. Got the lease on the World Trade Center towers, which we can get into later, because Larry Silverstein absolutely needs to be in public view. So Building 7 was a 47-story steel frame building. And it fell at 5:20 in the afternoon on 9/11, having not been hit by a plane. And if you look at it, you can go on the internet, put in YouTube Building 7 collapse. You will see the most obvious controlled demolition you will ever see. The first 2.5 seconds of that building falling were in free fall speed, because what was below, as the top fell, had already gone, because it was a controlled demolition. You see every now and again, you see on the news, you see stadiums blown up and big towers come down, and they don't fall over where they can hit other buildings, they fall on their own footprint. It's exactly what Building 7 did. What the official story says, he takes a breath because even I can't believe it. And this is the official government explanation of why Building 7 fell, was because of office furnishings fires, which would never even get close to the heat necessary to destabilize a building. And Building 7 coming down through fire, not even from a plane hit, but from office furnishings, official story, makes it, before and since, in the whole of architectural engineering history, the first steel frame building to fall and collapse because of fire. And as synchronicity would have it, this very week, the University of Alaska, Fairbanks, has produced a report after a 4-year study into asking the question, could Building 7 have fallen because of fire? I cover the interim report in the book. This week, they produced their final report. And they've said, these are academics and engineers, and building people. No way could Building 7 have fallen through fire. So Building 7 is a massive symbol of the lie that is 9/11 because it could not have fallen. And I quote in the book so many different building experts, engineers, architects, saying, it's a controlled demolition, Building 7. And there's even, of course, most people won't realize, there are groups of experts in their field, like architects and engineers for 9/11 Truth, pilots for 9/11 Truth, firefighters for 9/11 Truth, a great stream of them that have been created since 9/11 to challenge different aspects of the official story, which makes no sense. And so we have a situation where Building 7 was a controlled demolition quite demonstrably. And you know who told us it was? Larry Silverstein, the owner. He made a big mistake. He was caught with his pants down here. He was interviewed on a PBS, Public Service Broadcasting, documentary about 9/11, not long afterwards, or some time afterwards. And he was describing what happened that afternoon in regard to Building 7. He said, what happened, and I quote him word for word in the book, and you can see it on the internet, you see the clip. He said, what happened was the fire commander came to me and said that Building 7 was unstable. And Silverstein, who made a fortune out of the insurance payout, said, well, you know, there's been such a loss of life that let's just pull it. Means controlled demolition, the building. And he said, and then we sat there later in the afternoon and we watched the building come down. One, that fire commander has never come forward and said, yes, we had that conversation. Never happened. And secondly, there's this little matter. First of all, fire officers do not demolish buildings. Experts do. And secondly, it takes weeks to put the charges in the right places within a building the size of Building 7 for the building to be made to fall on its own footprint in a controlled demolition, which is exactly what Building 7 did. So, first of all, building experts say it's a controlled demolition. And secondly, Silverstein said it is, and describes a story of how it came down, which is absolutely impossible. And I would say this to the mainstream media. Why does it take people like me to ask those questions? Why haven't you asked questions about the blatantly bloody obvious in regard to that alone in the last 18 years? So Building 7 was a lie of massive proportions. Then you look at the Twin Towers. The Twin Towers fell in free fall speed, a mean figure of about 10 seconds. And the official story is that the towers fell because the weight of the falling debris above was pancaking and collapsing the building below. Well, hold on a minute. You know, I didn't go to a good school, but I am able to work out that when something pancakes, there's resistance. So how did both towers fall in free fall speed? Because all the resistance below had gone before the debris above actually was able to strike it. But that's not a problem. Not a problem. What you do, Brian, is you get experts in, building experts. You get them to look through the steel and the rubble, and they'll tell you what brought the building down. If there were charges in the building, they will be able to find that. So it's not a problem, except the man in overall charge of the criminal investigation into 9/11 was a guy called Michael Chertoff, a rabid ultra-Zionist extremist who oversaw the whole criminal investigation. In the hierarchy underneath him the decision was made to clear the World Trade Center site as fast as possible of the rubble and the steel in both the Twin Towers and Building 7 and take it to two scrap yards in New Jersey and the New York area. The rubble was taken away by an ultra-Zionist controlled company, and they used GPS tracking for the trucks because they said the contents is so sensitive. Sensitive? When they got it to the scrap yards owned by ultra-Zionist companies, they cut the steel up immediately into short lengths, put them on ships and shipped them out to Asia for smelting to become someone's fridge. And the New York Times, I quote it in the book, it's when you mention, Brian, the people who died and the people who lost loved ones left behind, who I dedicate the book to. Tell me what this means in terms of contempt for those people. The engineers and people that were seeking to investigate how the towers came down, all three of them, were outraged that the evidence was taken away so fast, as it was, by the way, with the Oklahoma bombing of the Murrah building in 1995. And this New York Times article describes this scene. In one of these scrap yards in New Jersey, where the rubble is piled up and the steel is piled up, ready for cutting and sending to Asia, big grabbers are coming down, picking it up, moving it around. And this New York Times article describes how engineers and people investigating what happened on 9/11 to the buildings were waiting for the diggers to pull away, and they were running into the rubble and looking to see what they could find in terms of evidence that would be useful, and then they would run back off for another one coming down. If ever I have described total contempt for the victims both living with it and those who died on 9/11, then that scene is it. So why would a government, military intelligence network, not make 9/11 the most painstaking, thorough investigation into a terrorist attack in human history, given what you've very brilliantly described in terms of how people were affected by that? Instead, they want to rush away, get the evidence out of the way so experts can't establish beyond doubt, how those buildings came down. It's an extraordinary story. And every area of 9/11 has this theme of contempt for those who died and loved ones left behind, and efforts to hide the truth of what happened. I mean, how about this? There's a few firsts in 9/11, a few never happened befores, including the suspension of the laws of physics, by the way. Whenever there's an air crash of any kind, the investigators establish the nature and proof of the nature and identity of the plane or planes. And they do this very simply with every crash. They take the parts they found, and every one has a serial number. They then check the maintenance logs of the plane, which every time a part is changed, and there's some called time change parts, which have to be changed in a period, whether they're damaged or not, or worn or not, they have to be changed. And they see that the maintenance log code for that part and the code on the part found at the crash are the same. Every crash does that, because then they know, yes, the identity of the plane. On 9/11, to this day, that has never been done. They have never established in the simplest way possible that those 4 planes that left the airports were the ones that hit the building and crashed in Pennsylvania. And I know this for a fact because the FBI had to admit it. There was a Freedom of Information Act request for the documentation showing that that was done to prove that the planes that left the airports were the ones that crashed. And the FBI replied, that was never done, and the reason why is the identity of the planes was never in doubt. Well, when you read the book, you'll find that the identity of those planes was absolutely fundamentally in doubt in terms of whether they were the same planes. I say they weren't. How about this? Every time there is a hijack, the first thing a pilot has to do is punch in a 4-digit code immediately. It takes that long. And on the ground, they realize there's a hijack. Happens every time, except on 9/11. None of those pilots on those 4 planes, none of them punched in the hijack code that day. Like I say, it's never happened before. It's all over this story. And in every aspect and every area you look at, the house of cards comes falling down. And I just repeat again before I just finish this point. If I can do it, then the mainstream media have been able to do it worldwide for the last 18 years. Why haven't they?
Why haven't they? Because they're supported by advertising and the Defense Department, and they don't want to rock the boat.
Well, the greatest form and the worst and most insidious form of censorship is self-censorship, where you know you mustn't cross that line or there's going to be problems. And of course, you can have journalists who, not many in the mainstream, it seems to me, who would like to ask questions, but what goes in the newspapers, what goes on the news bulletin is decided by those that run the organization, not by individual journalists. And so you have a situation where a house of cards that is so blatantly a pack of lies has gone uninvestigated and unchallenged by the mainstream media for 18 years. And that is another insult to those who died and loved ones left behind.
Let's just zoom out a bit, because in the first 2 chapters of the book, you talk about your concept of kind of the spider's web, and then you get into what you call the hidden hand, some of the people that were involved in this whole process. And then I'd love to get in a little deeper into the flights and then,
Sure.
Of course, go deeper into your problem, reaction, solution system. But for people that don't know, what do you mean by the spider's web?
The question that people ask when people like me talk about a few controlling the world and the direction of the world to a very, very clear and specific end that I talk about at the end of the book, it's an understandable question. How could a few control so many people? It's not possible, but it is. And you know, when I used to do jigsaw puzzles, I've done one for a long time, but when I did, I always wanted to get the outside frame first, the straight bits, because then it becomes easier to put the pieces in the middle. So when I started uncovering the fact that yes, a few people do control the direction of the world, I wanted to know how they could do it. And this is the structure through which they do it. Imagine a spider's web. In the center is the spider. That's deep in the shadows. You don't see that. And that's dictating events. The strands in the web immediately around the spider are the most exclusive secret societies. Many of them don't even have names, which makes them harder to track. And as you come out in the web, still in the hidden, you start hitting the secret societies we do know about, but we don't know what goes on in them unless you do serious research. These are the Freemasons, and I'm talking about the inner core of the Freemasons, not Fred and Joe down the lodge, you know. We're talking the Knights Templar, the Knights of Malta, Opus Dei, the inner core of the Jesuit order, and many others. And you come out of the web in that, still in the hidden, and then you hit what I call the cusp. These are organizations that are kind of semi-secret. Thanks to people like me that do what I do, they're less secret than they were, but they're semi-secret. These cusp organizations, which are organizations like the Council on Foreign Relations in America, which has driven US foreign policy in so many ways since it was formed in 1921. The Bilderberg Group, created in 1954 at the Bilderberg Hotel in Oosterbeek, Holland. The Trilateral Commission, 1972-73, created by David Rockefeller and Zbigniew Brzezinski, Jimmy Carter's national security advisor, who is very much involved in this. He's not with us any longer, neither is David Rockefeller, but they're fundamentally involved in this whole web. And the Club of Rome, which was formed in the 1960s, specifically to exploit the environment as a problem to which a solution could be proposed. And what I said, just a very brief aside, but it's important given current events, what I wrote years ago, decades ago, was that the reason we're having what I call the human-caused global warming hoax, people say, well, why would they hoax? Why would they lie to us about that? Because it is a problem, or in this case, a manufactured problem, to which they can offer a solution. And I said, what the solution is going to be, this is decades ago, is to say that they must have centralization of power over the fine detail of people's lives and lifestyles to save the planet. That's what's coming. And now, of course, it's here. And so you've got these cusp organizations, and what their role is, they pull together people in politics and banking and business and intelligence and media, is to take this, if you like, the spider agenda from the shadows and play it out through into the mainstream arena. And at that point in the web, we're in the world of the scene. We're into governments, government agencies, the so-called deep state, which I've been writing about for 30 years nearly, and now it's common parlance, the deep state. And the banking system, corporations, etc. And you see decisions being made, like with Silicon Valley and all the censorship of alternative information, including that about 9/11. They seem to be random decisions being made in the world of the scene, but they're not. If you go back into the shadows, those random decisions are not random at all. Because if you go back to the spider level, Facebook is Google. Google is Amazon. Amazon is the banking system. The banking system is the biotech cartel, is the big pharma cartel, is government at its core controlling level. And you start to realize that actually this web is what's pulling it all together. And, you know, in terms of 9/11, it's through this web that it was pulled off, with only a very, very few people needing to know about it because of this system that all intelligence agencies use, and funnily enough, secret societies use, of compartmentalization. Example, you look at the Freemasons, the vast majority of Freemasons in the world are on the bottom 3 levels of degree, the blue degrees. That's as far as they get. But in the Scottish Rite of Freemasonry, there's 33 degrees, and then there's other degrees above that that most Freemasons don't even know about, where the real deal is. And so the vast majority of Freemasons, they have no idea what other levels of Freemasonry know. And this is how intelligence agencies work. They call it the need to know principle. Only let people within the organization know enough to do their job, make their contribution, but not enough to know how their contribution fits in with everyone else's to create a very different picture to what the individual contribution looks like in and of itself. And so this compartmentalization means that so many people can contribute to something like 9/11, but they have no idea that their individual contribution is part of it. You know, if you want to hide a technology about actually what it is, you get the different parts made in different areas of the world, different places, different companies. So they're making a part. They don't know what it's part of. The only people that know what the technology actually is are those right at the end, the very few, who put the parts together. Everybody else is in ignorance. What's this for? I don't know. Our mind's not to reason why. Just make it, mate. And this is how compartmentalization works. And it means that very few people need to know to make something like this happen. So if you look at a police force, you have to control very few people in a police force to dictate who is prosecuted, who is not prosecuted, what's investigated, what's not investigated. You only have to control those positions in the police force that make those decisions. All your rank and file police then react to those decisions. Oh, don't investigate him, don't investigate that. And this is how it's done. Very few people have to be aware of 9/11 to make that happen. And that's how the whole web works.
Okay. And what